Chapter 7 The Move. Day left on his voyage, and the rest of the family worked hard to prepare as much food as possible for the winter. For days, the girls dried and then parched the corn that they had saved from the hungry birds. Around and around they stirred the corn in an iron kettle over a low fire. Nokomis went over to Tallow's place and pounded some of the corn to meal with the hollowed log and great round stick that Tallow kept in her yard. While Nokomis worked on the corn, Tallow gutted fish and dried them on a big scaffold that she set up over a special fire she would feed day and night with cedar wood to give the fish a special flavor. The charcoal from the cedar she would keep to mix the pine pitch. Mixed together, the stuff made caulking for the seams of their canoes. At the winter cabin, Day had built a rough lean-to and attached it alongside the northern wall. Inside the log lean-to, it had dug out a deep round hole. Angeline and Mama spent one morning lining the earth of the hole with birch bark. They made a tight bark container, like a big makuk, and lined that container with bunches of dried grass. Then they took more curved pieces of birch bark and set them in the interior. This was their food cache. Within the cache, Mama first placed several packs of dried smoked fish and venison, all tied carefully together in 2 layers of bark. When those packs were set neatly down on the bottom, she told Omakayas to fetch the parched corn, which she had stored in neat skin bags. There were several makuks of wild rice from the fall's gathering. Though the harvest had been so poor, Mama had used the intestines of the moose to store the pounded meat and dried berries they would have on feast days as a treat. She set those very carefully to one side, surrounded by sheaves of bark. Deep in the food cache, unseen to anyone but Omakayas, Mama set 8 birch bark cones of maple sugar. These, Omakayas knew, were for the hardest times in winter, when they would need sweetness to survive and spirit, as well as food to keep them strong. When all was finished, Nokomis came to bless the cache. In the deep light of the fading afternoon, Grandma raised her arms the way she did at sunrise near the water. Everything grew very quiet around her. Even Pinch stopped shuffling his feet and rubbing his nose. Outside, the birds hushed. The sky bent to listen. The wind died down. Golden leaves hung balanced in the air. It was as though Omakayas thought of all of creation was interested in Omakayas' words. Even her own heart beat quieter, and that excited, jumping feeling in her calmed. Whenever Grandma prayed, she made the world around her feel protected, safe, eternal. Nokomis bent over and looked very carefully at the cache to make certain that it was properly packed. Anisha, she breathed quietly, standing again, holding in her palm a tiny mound of tobacco. She looked down at the tobacco, touched it lovingly, and asked the spirit for protection against the cold. She spoke to the Creator. "We're very small," she said, "just human. Help us to live this winter through. Come to us, especially during the harshest moon, the crust on the snow moon, when so often meat is scarce, when the ice is too thick to catch many fish, when disease breaks us and the Wendigo spirit, the hungry one, comes stalking. From house to Anishiwa house. Daga, Widagoka, Anishiwa, Widakopa, Anishibeg," she asked. Her voice was soft, but deep and troubled. Stillness swirled about the little cabin when she finished. It was as though everyone's heart were touched a little by the coming cold, as though a shadow of the Wendigo swept across their minds. Omakaya shivered. Angeline touched her shoulder. Mama stroked Pinch's rough, hay-light stack of hair. Baby Nua was the first to make a sound, and that sound was a sudden cry. They spent that last night in the birchbark house, chilled in their robes and blankets. Already Omakayas missed summer. When morning came, Mama hardly had the fire going before they all began to pack. Mama stirred the soup in the kettle, heated it through, and brought some to Nokomis in the tin bowl with the trader's spoon. Nokomis drank it all up, stretched her arms, hopped to her feet with a young girl's agility. She rubbed her hands. She loved moving, packing, changing locations. Before the sun even popped its rays through the lowest brush, she was carefully rolled up the rush mats she had woven. From the inside walls of the house, she lifted down her careful bundles of roots, her bags of berries and dried crumbled leaves, and long curls of inner bark of certain trees.